Good morning. Good morning. It seems like it's been 2 months rather than 12 since we've been here, but it's wonderful to be back with you. So thank you for having us again this year. And Ian and I look forward to sharing with you what God is doing in and through the Dublin Christian Mission. One of the things that I'd like to talk about, which was actually mentioned a little bit earlier, is one of the things I've learned being part of a city mission is that if we really desire to be missional in our lives, we need to be relational. That there seems to be a direct contact between being missional for Jesus requires us to be relational. And I think when we look at the Gospels, don't we see that? You know, it's amazing the way when you look at the 4 Gospels, over and over and over again, you see these stories and accounts of Jesus having these very intimate relationships with people. And it's through those encounters that amazing things happen. Lives are transformed. And so with that concept in mind, that's our desire as a city mission, is that even though we see the multitudes, our work is really an individual work. It's an individual work to each life that God brings through our doors. In a few minutes, Ian's going to come up and share about his story and the way God has used the Lighthouse in his life. And he's also going to share with you some of the services that we're providing at the Lighthouse, our homeless center. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Chancery Place, our community center. Currently, we have 9 after-school clubs in which we're doing both in Chancery Place and our in Dublin 7, and then we're also doing after-school clubs in one of the schools in the James Street area and also in the F2, which is in Fatima Mansions. So we have 9 after-school clubs going on there, all for the purpose to be able to be mentors in these young lives that I think we see so desperately needed today. Just recently, we were in the office, and Anto, one of our youth workers, received a phone call, and it was from a young teenager who found himself with a problem with drugs. But as much as that situation is not one that we want to hear, the one thing I did love to hear was that his first comment to Anto was, "I didn't know who else to call." And I thought, isn't that brilliant, that unfortunately this young lad finds himself in the situation of being hooked on drugs, but then yet his response was to call his youth worker. And so it's those type of things that we really desire to see and watch God do, that as we connect in people's lives relationally and with these young people, wouldn't it be great that they say, "I didn't know who else to call"? At Chancery Place, we also have a community cafe that's open Monday through Friday, and the purpose of the cafe is just to have people come through our doors, which happens, and the cafe has been, I think, a little bit over 2 years, and we've seen it actually work even greater than what our initial expectations were, where people are coming in the door, they're meeting us, they're learning about the work of the mission and what we're doing. We also have transitional housing where some guys live with us within Chancery Place, and the concept of that is if these guys come in and live under the roof of the mission, there's going to be a substantial transition that takes place in their lives. And we've seen several grow in their faith. We've seen several come in and maybe be in recovery or end up getting employment or just moving on and having these substantial transitions in their lives. We also have a food pantry, which you can imagine this time of year is extremely busy. There's a lot of needs for food hampers, both at Chancery Place and at the Lighthouse, that we're very busy so that we can help people with it, in particular this time of year with the Christmas season coming up. One of the things that, again, in a very unique way, and the way God is working individually, is we've seen God sends people to along our path that He can use the life of the mission to help people. And recently, a teenager, Patrick, came to the mission, and someone asked if he could volunteer with us. And Patrick has had a very difficult upbringing. He grew up in a variety of foster homes, in some of the youth residential institutions, and that was his upbringing. He came to us, he's in his late teens. And one of the things that I love to hear is that one of his caseworkers or his social workers made the comment to someone recently, I don't know what's going on, but it's amazing what's happened to Patrick. And so hopefully that's the story of what we are in the mission, that we see literally hundreds of people every week. But what we want to do is, like Jesus, like in the Gospels, is that we're there to engage and impact each individual life. What I'd like to do is share with you, if you have your Bibles, in Luke chapter 14. I'd like to share a passage that is kind of unique to our hearts and what we do at the Lighthouse. In Luke chapter 14, Jesus is having dinner with a bunch of Pharisees. And so we already know with the concept of what that would have looked like if Jesus was dining with the Pharisees. And his desire is to tell them about what it is like, someone that participates in the work of the kingdom of God. And he goes through several items. He talks about initially where he brings up about healing on the Sabbath, and he talks about being traditional versus being relational. Then he talks about the importance of humility in a parable. And then he also tells about this new and kind of strange way of inviting guests. Invite the guests that cannot repay. So he starts out with those three messages to tell the Pharisees. And then the one we're going to take a look at starts in verse 15, and it's the parable of the great banquet. And so as we said, he's with Pharisees, and it says, when one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to those who had been invited. 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I have bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I have bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' Still another said, 'I just got married, so I cannot come.' The servant came back and reported this to the master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and the alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you have ordered I have done, but there is still room.' Then the master told his servant, 'Go out to the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who was invited will get a taste of my banquet.'" So we see in this parable that the host represents God, the servant is Jesus, and there's the historical context of this text, but I think there's a lot of practical lessons that we can use in our own lives today. Jesus is trying to tell the hearers at this table that encouraging them to participate, but also warning them if they reject. The initial guests in this parable would have been the Jews, but yet there's some excuses that they give. One of the things I really find very fascinating about this particular parable is the excuses themselves. You know, they aren't these huge, extreme things. They're just practical, everyday things of life. One of them has bought some property. Another has bought some animals. One has just been recently married. But these are the excuses for rejecting the banquet. I think we can just conclude from this that Jesus is warning us that God has to be first. Nothing in this life, even if it seems good and something we should be doing or participating in, it cannot come before the invitation of God. The host gets angry over his gracious invitation in those that have rejected him. And so he says, open the door to the streets, to the alleyways. Let anyone that is invited to come in. You know, this commission is urgent. You know, there's just this unique time in our own lives to accept this invitation to the great banquet. You know, I think there's also some very good practical lessons that I see in this passage, especially with what we do at the Lighthouse. You know, often we expect our lives to be very predictable, don't we? You know, sometimes when we get invited to an event, we can almost picture exactly what it's going to be like, how people are going to behave and what the conversations are going to be like. Sometimes it's even us that's giving excuses of why we can't attend the banquet. You know, often I find that just because of the pure exhaustion of the day or the busyness that maybe I even put on my own life, I reject invitations from others. And I'd also have to admit that probably I've rejected invitations that were given from the King. You know, at the Lighthouse, our invitation is to those on the streets, those that are hungry, sick, lonely, hurt, and even occasionally angry. And unlike the very predictable situations we love in our own lives, what takes place at the Lighthouse is very unpredictable. When we open the doors, we're trusting God. We have no idea how many will attend that particular day. We have no idea if there'll be conflicts that day. We have no idea if we'll run out of food. Sometimes we find ourselves feeding people that haven't eaten for days. Other times we sit and have chats with people that we almost find their stories unbelievable. But all along, we're looking for the opportunity to open up, that we can share our faith in Jesus and what he has done in our own personal lives. One particular Saturday, we begin preparation late morning to open the doors at around 4. We had a great day of preparation. Before we open, we have a time of worship and prayer, anticipating all that God is going to do that day as we open the doors. That particular Saturday, when we opened the door, the place went mad. Within the first hour, we had over 100 guests. And in particular rooms, there were conflicts taking place, which fortunately doesn't happen often, but they did this day. Ian and a couple other guys were trying to shut that down. I was up in the upper dining room where a young man, Cody, was having a seizure in the middle of the dining room, trying to deal with that. At one point, I remember I kind of pulled back and I leaned against one of the walls and I said, "Oh, Lord, help us on this day." You know, for a while, there was complete chaos. But after a while, things calmed down and it went back to a normal Saturday, and we served over 150 meals, giving out clothing and just having an incredible time with our guests. You know, like this parable that we just read, we call our homeless friends our guests. When we open the doors, it's very unpredictable. The people to the streets, the poor, the hungry, the hurting. You know, and many times that can get messy when you're willing to do that. You never know what the day will bring, the challenges that you'll face, the heartbreaking stories that you'll hear, but also the wonderful opportunities. You know, I thought that night after that long, crazy day, I thought how blessed we are to be in the Father's business, to be his servant, going out to the streets and calling them in, engaging in the messiness, but representing Jesus, confident that God is in this. You know, this banquet in Dublin is very different than many others. We put out an incredible meal. I don't cook, so I say that for the others that do. We put out an incredible meal, but what we're about is not the meal, it's about what our master is doing. About 8 p.m. that night, we were finished up, and when I was reflecting on the day, I kind of felt beat up and a little bit exhausted that day. But then the interesting thing that happened that evening was I started to receive some text messages. One of them was from Linda, and she said that she had the opportunity to speak with a couple that recently became homeless because they had lost everything and had an opportunity to pray with them. Another one from Catherine said to me, "Boy, what a day that was. It was so hectic, but it was amazing the things that were going on." Bernard said to me, a young man came to me so broken, a young teenager, and I had an opportunity to take him to the prayer room and share with him about my faith and my hope in Jesus and some of his own story. And then as I thought of these messages, I remembered the many faces that came through our door that we were able to give a meal, an article of clothing, and remembering their smiling faces. You see, in all the mess that was going on, the kingdom of God was in action. You know, I sat there kind of exhausted, but marveling at the things God was doing. In all the mess of the invitation to the banquet, He was at work. You know, amongst the busyness and the chaos, in the background, in all these different areas and different relationships, God was at work, engaging in lives, impacting lives, one-on-one, in a soft voice, in a gentle touch. You know, those type of things remind me of, again, the Gospels and the way Jesus works so intimately of the chaos and the mess of day-to-day life, and then He would have these individual encounters in which He would work. This kind of reminds me of some scenes that all of us may remember from the trade centers. Many times when I think of what happened at the trade centers, I remember the image of the people running from the buildings in those big dust clouds following them is one of the images that I remember. And the people fleeing through the streets of New York away from the trade centers. But the less common story is the ones that ran to the building. The ones that ran to the building. You know, and I think sometimes they were willing to run to the building to help save lives. You know, and I think as Christians, sometimes we need to not be running away from the messes and the destruction of this world, but actually running to it. So I think often we have to think, are we running away or are we running to the messes so that we can share our faith and our hope in Jesus? You know, I certainly want to thank you as a church and as a community for your support, your prayers, and your love to us at the City Mission. You know, we thank you for your friendship. We thank you for the provisions that you provide and your willingness to help partner with us in the mess that God has called us to go out, to bring in the lost, the needy, and the poor, so that His house may be full. You know, I think often as Christians, we want our lives to be orderly, messy-free, don't we? But yet I think as Christians, we're called to be in the messes of day-to-day life, demonstrating God in word and deed, helping people to see from the chaos to the peace, from the streets to the banquet. And all we do, if it's in our homeless work, our youth work, our community outreaches, our cafe, our transitional housing, our food pantry, in all these things, it's so that we can engage into the messiness of people's lives and see what God will do. So again, I thank you for your support, your love, your friendship to us, so that we can be out there giving people the invitation to his banquet. Thank you. Ian?
Hey, my name is Ian O'Brien. Born and raised in Dublin. I want to point out, I don't really like this. You know, it's not about me, it's about he who's in me, you know, and to get to the story of where it came from, you have to start from the beginning. You know, I like what you said with the way Joe about running away from the cloud, because that's just the T, running into the cloud rather than away from it. But when you know who's behind you, you can go at that cloud, fierce as a lion, and gentle as an animal needed, you know. But my own life would have been a life of pure addiction from very, very, very early on. From the age of 9, I think I started drinking. But by 16 I was a father of a daughter. By the time I was 18 I had 2 daughters. But my life moved on. I kind of went with what I wanted to go to. I would have been atheist. I wouldn't have had any faith, any belief. But I went on using drugs. I spent years in prison. Yeah, there was nothing glorious about it. It was just praising, total and utter praising. Along the way, we met a partner. I had 2 more children, another 2 girls. And for me, I think at 40, heading towards the 40 mark, my body was just not able for it no more. It was like the drugs got to the extent where I become really ill inside, not just mentally, physically, spiritually, the lot. My partner at the time, Wendy, we were 17 years in active addiction together. That was the glue that held their relationship together. She became ill. One particular day I was to go to court in Town Court, and she had to go to hospital for a day visit. That day I went to court and I got 3 months. I was expecting to come home that day. I got 3 months sentence. She was at the going in and they told her they were keeping her in. 2 days later, she dumped a cigarette, she had a trip, fell, had a bang on the head, and got a bleed to the brain. So within 4 days, she lost her life. She lost her fight with, you know, her body just couldn't keep up with it. My 2 girls that we were living with, we had a home together and stuff like that. By the time I got out of prison, my daughters were gone, the home was gone. I kind of lost everything, but I still hadn't got to that place of surrender in any way, shape or form. For me, it kind of went on. It just fueled the fire, fueled the addiction, and I just went on. I kept drinking, I kept taking drugs, and I just kept steady the same attitude. But I remember waking up one morning and I was absolutely totally broken. I just woke and I was crying uncontrollably. I was sitting on the edge of my bed and I just couldn't stop. I was just totally, I'd never felt so broken all my life. And I was like, what do I do next? You know? And I just got, it just kind of, it was like it wasn't a voice or, it was just a feeling, but I could hear it. You know what I mean? And it was like, you need to go to England. Now, I'd previously been in prison in England and I was still wanted in the country, so my old head was saying, what, go to England for? Just, you know, go back to prison. But, you know, I wouldn't follow through with it. But this feeling, this intense thing that kept hitting me, it kept at me for about a week, 2 weeks, so I decided to follow through with it. I went to England. Within 2 weeks of being in England, I was back in prison. I went to 3 hours banger. It's that story in my life. Just that revolving door syndrome. I went to see the medics. The medics said, well, we need to send you to Outside Hospital. Went to Outside Hospital, seen a doctor in the hospital outside in Tewton. He turned around and he said, you're in the last stages of liver failure. The life expectancy right now is 3 months. I went in to see if you have cancer of the blood, but you have to confirm that it's tested still. But basically, you're simple. we put you on a priority transplant list in King's College Hospital. There's a good chance you won't get it because you're an Irish inmate in England. So I kind of went back to the cell, 23 O'Brien, and I was actually locked up with another Dublin boy. And he said, how did it go? And at first I didn't tell him. But I'm sitting there and I'm kind of looking out the window and I'm like, I have grandchildren, I have daughters that are carrying my grandchildren that I haven't seen yet. I have two younger daughters that have lost their mother. Do you know what I mean? Never going to lose their father. And I was like, there was nowhere for me to go. There was no one to turn to but God. Do you know, that's to the extreme he had to take me. Do you know, before they actually got down to the knees and said, look, I need to dig out from someone, you know, and not someone out on the land and not someone out on the street. And for me, things started to change fairly rapidly, to be quite honest. I went back to the doctor and over a period of about 2 or 3 visits, he said, look, we can get the treatment from America, it's a liver regeneration drug. But the NHS want to buy it from America, so we need something. Can you pick it off? We will do it. I said, well, what other choice do I have? It's either that or I just lose my good kind of thing. But we started the treatment, within like weeks of starting the treatment, my liver started to regenerate, I started to get better. Until I got to a point where I no longer needed a liver transplant. I had hepatitis C at the time from intravenous use of drugs. So he said, look, there's a cure in the UK here for hepatitis C. Would you be interested in the same thing? The trials, it cost well over £1 million for all the treatment that I got. A pharmaceutical company in America stepped in and sponsored me that money to pay for the treatment. Now, God is not in that. Do you know what I mean? You know, for me, this whole process happened. After that process happened, my life, I was like gaining my life. I was one of the first 4 people in the UK to be cured of hepatitis C. And once I regained my life, I thought, I cannot get physically better and not address the spiritual, mental side of things. So I went straight into treatment. And when I was sitting in treatment, I think I've always had faith. Being brought up in a Catholic family, it was ingrained in me to have faith in God. Even, you know, when I said earlier on about the whole atheism thing, I seen my brother die of cancer at 14 and that turned me against God. It was like, how could he let that happen? My younger brother, he set me in hell his hand Christmas Eve when he died of cancer. So that turned me against God. But I got to a place where I went to treatment and I started doing step walk. And the doing step walk, you're looking at your own insanity, you're looking at, you know, how you affect other people and stuff like that. You're not just doing it, you're sitting, you're writing it down. And for me at that time, at that place and where I was in my life, I could get totally honest, not just with everybody, but just totally honest with myself. And then I remember sitting and getting an understanding of the power breaker in myself. And when I sat and started writing these examples, I could see where God had moved in my life. You know, I could see times of drug rabbits, ODs, intensive care, where I shouldn't be here, but something beyond me had saved me or kept me where I was at for a reason. Although I kept going against the grain, it was there for a reason, you know. So once I started, I could see where God had moved in my life. So for me, I finished the prison sentence, I got released, and I had to come back to Dublin. I had to come back to Dublin to the same house that I left, where my wash using was done. The area Joe spoke about, James Street and stuff like that. My daughters lived there, and I lived in Fatima for 17 years. So I wasn't people, places, and things you have to change. But I knew that was impossible for me. Do you know what I mean? I knew that was impossible for me. And some of my friends in recovery, you know, said, you're mad, it's a no-no, you can't do it. I didn't have that luxury, I didn't have that choice, I had family there. But like I said earlier, you know, I had a power breaker myself that I hadn't got before. You know, I went back into that area, I linked in with Liberty Church, and I wanted to, you know, I wanted to start changing how I done things in my life. So basically, you know, I wanted to get involved. I went to a few different places to join the community, focus on them. They were asking me for emails, and I hadn't even got a phone at that stage. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know what an email, I couldn't even make up an email address, to be honest with you, but that's how far off the battle was. But so I was sitting in Liberty, and I met Bernard, who Joe just mentioned, he was the prayer room. I met Bernard, and Bernard says, come down to the Lighthouse. You know, and give a bit of time to the Lighthouse, he looked to have it. So I thought, so why not? But I remember going into the Lighthouse and sitting just down the tea and coffee, trying to keep it as low key as possible. And I'm seeing these guys floating in the doors, and a lot of them not recognising me because of the change that had taken place in such a, you know, within the space of a year. And then the odd boy recognising me, Jesus, I thought you were dead. Do you know what I mean? That's the kind of response we're getting. But yeah, I remember just sitting there, and these were guys that I would have sold drugs to. These are guys that I would have bought drugs from. These are guys that I would have met in prison and stuff like that. Do you know, and then I would have sat and thought, my past life is not going to stand me very, very well at all. Do you know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, I can deal with an awful lot with my hands and stuff like that. I wasn't totally useless. Do you know what I mean? But it's like, my past life, I thought would never stand for anything. But yeah, I find myself in the Lighthouse. Do you know what I mean? And the guys are coming in, and you see the brokenness. You know, you see where they're at. And because they can recognise in me a place where they are, you know, they can see it's a place that I've been. You know, it breaks it down so much quicker. Do you know what I mean? I found myself up in prison, doing prisoners groups, up in prison, and sitting with 18 inmates, talking about change. You know, suggesting steps that we make to turn their life around and stuff like that. And anyone then said to me, listen, I can sit and listen to you or talk to you, because you're not a textbook merchant, you're not a guy with a suit and stuff like that. And it's the same kind of principle in the Lighthouse. Do you know what I mean? I always use a phrase to Joe, the stuff that we give in the Lighthouse, the groups, the food, the clothes, it's like when you go fishing. You don't go fishing and just throw a hook into the water and hope for the best. You need bait. Do you know what I mean? You know, and that's as basic as you're going to get it. You know, our service is that day. Someone will come in needing a sleep bag. Someone will come in just for a cup of tea. And believe me, when you meet a total stranger and they ask you for a clean, dry pair of socks, and you can provide them with a dry pair of socks and a hat and a pair of gloves, when you see that look on their face, you know, because they're not used to anybody, they're used to people stepping over them in the street. That's a blessing for you, onto you, to be able to be in that position, to give that to that person. So you're a blessing unto them, you know. And we see that constant all the time in the Lighthouse. There's a guy Daniel, that comes in quite regular the last couple of years. I haven't seen him for about 3 months, we haven't. And the next minute the doors open, it's an automatic door we come into the Lighthouse. The door opens and this guy comes in a wheelchair, one of his legs gone. You know, and I'm standing. And the leg was taken away because of his drug use. Do you know what I mean? But not bad enough that you haven't got a home around. Now you start losing bits of your body. That's the type of people, and you know, there's a community of them type of people in Dublin. And I believe it's them people are soft and gentle, and they're like anyone else in this room. But their circumstances have them in a place of where they're at right now. You know, and when you can kind of relate that and sit down and meet somebody where they're at right there and then, it makes it so much easier. I was flicking through Facebook later on that week, and we seen a homeless charity putting up you know, one of the posters. But next to it, we seen a picture of a guy in the middle of the night on a pavement with a sleeping bag, another sleeping bag over him, and a blanket, and a wheelchair sitting beside him with a pizza box on the wheelchair, and one leg sticking out from under there. And I said to myself, it's that Daniel. We have worked here in the Lighthouse for, haven't seen him since. Do you know what I mean? But as sad as that is, you know, if it wasn't for the staff at the Lighthouse, for the volunteers at the Lighthouse, you know, and for the gifts from people here in this room, and other people in other rooms, do you know what I mean? Nothing would be done, stuff wouldn't get done, do you know what I mean? Stuff wouldn't get done. And whenever I ask myself, because I get doubts in my head, do you know what I mean? You know, sitting down there getting up after Joe to talk and stuff like that, you know, we always kind of get a little bit nervous and stuff like that. But I know what the enemy is like, do you know what I mean? You know, I know he can just come in and just try to take me out and set me up here and shoot me up. I don't know what I am down, I just play it off the top of my head. If God has something for me to say to somebody, he'll use me to do that. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, we've so much right now. We're blessed in that we have so much going on at the Lighthouse. Besides just the meals, you know, we have the nighttime tap, so we're extending our hours from 7:30 to 10:30, which is brilliant for any of the guys that are out. You know that if you're staying in a hostel, you're up at 9 o'clock and you're out at 10 o'clock at night. So the guys that walk on the street, do you know what I mean? At least with our timetable, you know, we can kind of fill a day. Do you know what I mean? Because when people come in to eat at the Lighthouse, it's not sit down and have a food and then come on, we need that chair for somebody else. It's sit down and have a food. If you want to lay your head on the table, lay your head on the table. Do you know what I mean? That's okay. Once I lay out the cold and the wet and stuff, and like Joe was saying earlier, the relationship end of it, that helps so much with that. Do you know, the trust is built through them gestures and stuff like that. And once the trust is built, you know, then you can share the word, or you can save somebody, you know. But I get the lads, I get stick all the time off the lads. I get stick all the time off them because it's like me mad Bible basher. Do you know what I mean? Me mad born again. I was born again, but it wasn't yesterday. Do you know what I mean? It's just stuff like that new one. Do you know what I mean? Because you can't just go in there all guns blazing to a lot of these guys, because the shutters go up and they will turn and run. Do you know what I mean? But we have an education programme starting as well after Christmas. It's a BTO, back to school initiative for people of any age that have left school. I took part in myself. The people that have left school and just need to go back. I need to go back and just get my leaving cert just to get into college, because I hadn't even got my leaving cert. Me and Joe were only up there, when was it, a month ago? About a month ago we were just there and we were asked to go to the graduation, because we do it from the Lighthouse. Terry Money, he's a friend of mine who's a teacher in college. He'll come in and we do personal development, and he'll assess people and then take them on to college. But we were up and we were handing out the certs, and most of the guys that were actually getting certs on the day went through the Lighthouse. You know, so they went from a homeless service back to education, and please God, you know, college, or you know, it's helping people put the steps forward and you know, trying to build something with their life. But yeah, one now things to say, to be quite honest. But listen, thanks so much. And that garment, I know a woman, an elderly woman, whoever made that, trust me, that will go into hands that will really appreciate it. You know, our service doesn't just provide to the homeless, it provides to the people that just need not to be alone, people that are poverty stricken, people that just sometimes come into our place just to meet up and have fellowship. Do you know what I mean? Just to sit together and feel part of something. And I'm not slagging off about other soup kitchens here, but most of them, because I used soup kitchens when I was an addict, most of the soup kitchens that you go into it, it'll be like have your meal, you know, and that's as far as it goes, and you'll be sitting around watching what's going on, and it's very suspicious in nature. I have never seen anyone leave the Lighthouse and ever say that he felt any way uncomfortable, or they found this, I never heard about this place, I know where it is now, we'll see you next week, we'll see you Tuesday, wherever. Now and again we get a little kick off, but the guys, because of that atmosphere, when it does kick off, the guys will actually, you know, they check themselves a lot of the time. You just have to be there and present, and the guys will check themselves a lot of the time. And if not, we just grab them in the head. No, but listen, boys, thanks really so much for all your talk. support and stuff like that, you know, and again, the Lighthouse wouldn't be the Lighthouse if it wasn't for, you know, for other Christians, for people that give. Last night, we went to sleep last night at 11:30. I fell asleep in the clothes. We went to Lighthouse yesterday morning and we started prepping food at 10:30. I was cooking pork chops from 11:30 until 3 o'clock. I thought I was going to start naming the pork chops. Do you know what I mean? And then afterwards, we went in to a friend of mine's table out on the street at the central bank, you know, and served the whole day until 10:30 at night. And these people aren't Christians. These people are for Ballymun. What we call them, they're undercover Christians. They don't even know themselves, but they want to make impact. They see what's going on in the city and stuff like that. It's like going to the sick, going to the blind, going to the lame. You know, set all the captives free, even if you don't know they're being set free. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I went to sleep and I went upstairs and the two girls, thank God they're teenagers and you could look after themselves because they were on their own last night. But I went upstairs and I lay on the bed and boom, I just went out cold. And I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning and still had my clothes, you know, on me that I was wearing yesterday. But I didn't go up complaining about it. I just thought that was a really good, full day. In my past life, do you know what I mean? Madness would have happened in that day. Madness, and most of it would have been drug-induced stuff that I can't even remember. I have 40 years of my life behind me. A bit more than that now. 40 years of my life behind me. And I have no recollection of this. You know, there's births and stuff like that because of madness. You know, that I can't even remember. But I'm privileged to be in the position where I'm in now. To get to these guys, some of them only in their early 20s and stuff like that. And share a bit of myself, you know, a bit of what I had to do to get where I was. And install a bit of faith in them. Do you know what I mean? Give them some sort of belief. Do you know? Because they're all about the world. Do you know what I mean? And the world will let you down every time. They let me down every time. Do you know what I mean? On people, on these guys learning a better understanding of themselves, they're not going to grow spiritually. You know, don't. Jesus is the name that people get tattooed on their head. Do you know what I mean? It means nothing. But listen, boys, thanks again. Thanks so much.